The Greater Centerville Historians organized in the year 2000. The purpose of the organization is to preserve the history of the Township of Centerville, Cleveland and surrounding area. Gerald O'Neill, Charlie Bauer, Richard Wiegand, and myself, Kathleen Sixel, were the founding members. In 1831, the territory south of Green Bay was sold to the U.S. government by the Native Americans who had title to the land. The consideration was the promise of a reservation in another state. The Township of Centerville was established in 1850. The township had a village called Centerville. The reason for the hamlet's original name of Centerville was, in the days of the Indians, there was a trail along Lake Michigan between Manitowoc and Sheboygan. This heavenly spot was exactly at the halfway mark, so the early white man gave it the name Centerville. In 1849, the village of Centerville was surveyed and laid out in lots and blocks. The village of Centerville was renamed Hika when the Postmaster General informed the village leaders that another Centerville was located in the state. When it became time for Centerville to be renamed, a judge in Manitowoc by the name of Albert Schmidt would take kids hiking. The judge said, "You can't call a town hiking, so why not make it Hika?" Thus, the village of Centerville became Hika. In the early years, Centerville had the vision of becoming a lake port. To encourage ships to dock there, 2 piers were built into Lake Michigan. Many German immigrants arrived by schooners, and the village began to grow. The village had a brick factory, stores, schools, a Lutheran and a Catholic church, mills, saloons, blacksmith shop, and a fire department, and a brewery. When the brewery was built, the settlement began to flourish. But when fire destroyed the brewery, the largest industry, there was no longer a need for the harbor facilities. So ended this chapter of the development of Hika. 2 miles west of Hika, another settlement known as St. Wendel began to grow. It had a Catholic church, a general store with a connected dance hall, and a post office was also located in the complex, a funeral parlor, and at one time a motel. With the clearing of the forest, tilling of the land began. This prompted the exporting of lumber and grains. The farmers of Centerville looked forward to the building of a railway since they had a serious problem transporting their products. In 1873, the Milwaukee, Lakeshore, and Western Railroad was built between the settlements of Hika and St. Wendel and was named Centerville Station. In 1880, Centerville Station was renamed Cleveland after President Grover Cleveland. Cleveland, at that point in time, owes its growth to the fact that the Township of Centerville was a rich farming community, and farmers for miles around would bring products to be shipped by rail or ship. The village of Cleveland had several grocery stores, a furniture store, a funeral parlor, several saloons, Lutheran church, hardware stores, several gas stations, newspaper, photographer studio, several car dealerships, cheese factory, several feed mills, livestock yard, and lumber yards. The biggest business was the Cleveland Co-op, which offered many types of services. With the failing of grain crops, the farmers began dairy farming. With the abundance of milk, another industry began, cheese and butter making. Local cheese factories dotted the countryside. One-room schools were usually built near the cheese factories, so children would have a ride to school when farmers brought their milk. In 1958, Hika, St. Wendel, and Cleveland incorporated into the village of Cleveland. In 1968, the Cleveland Elementary School was built. The Township of Centerville has seen many farming changes, but dairy farming is still the primary vocation. Today, Cleveland is known as the seat of Lakeshore Technical College, which offers an educational alternative to 4-year colleges. An ancient proverb states, When an old person dies, a library burns to the ground. These words were the inspiration for organizing the Greater Centerville Historians. We hope to preserve as many memories as possible.
We have a young lady here who returned back from a beautiful trip, and she'd like to take over the duties that she's always handling for our group, and she can identify herself and the group also. Go right ahead, please.
My name is Kathy Schill. It is May 8th, 2006, and it was about 60 degrees today, or perhaps a little warmer, and we are the Greater Centerville Historians, is that right?
That's too much trip, Kathy.
I know, right? And this evening we're going to have Chris Canal and Al Pape give us a presentation.
Okay.
And I want to welcome everybody, and I want to particularly welcome Al and Chris.
Very good. And as far as the presentations being given, we are going to do that in its entirety, and I believe Chris will be first and Al will be second, but there's going to be an area in between where the people would like to ask questions. They may do so. Now, there's something you might want to direct them to do.
Perhaps if you have a question, jot it down as a little reminder for yourself after the presentation.
Okay.
And do you want the rules now?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Please raise your hand when you have information to add, and Mr. O'Neill will address you and move his camera so we do not miss any information you wish to share. Always state your full name. Try and use full names when referring to people, and don't use a nickname. And please don't visit when someone is speaking, because it'll pick up in the camera. And I also want to welcome Mr. Dare. So nice of you to come, Ron.
Okay, and I guess tonight's question from the videographer is, when did you take your driver's test, and if you remember the vehicle you used, and who taught you how to drive?
Well, I lived on a farm, so you drove tractor.
Okay.
And my parents taught me how to drive, and it was a 39 Ford, a stick on the bottom.
Okay.
And we knew the cop at Kiel, so it wasn't too bad to take the test. I couldn't parable park, and he said it was all right.
Okay, very good. You slid through on that one.
I slid through, and I think the name of the cop was Pearl.
That's right. Very good. Thank you. And who do you have here, please?
Hi, I'm Alan Pape from Greenbush, Wisconsin, Sheboygan County.
Okay.
And as far as the learning to drive business, I learned on a 1955 Dodge.
Okay.
Two-door hardtop. My Uncle Joe taught me how to drive. And I flunked the first test in Milwaukee because he said turn at the left at the next opportunity, and I did turn at the next opportunity, and I went right into a one-way traffic coming my way. It was a trick question, and I'll never regret. I did pass the second time.
You passed the second.
Outside of having my teeth pulled, having a driver's test in Milwaukee was my second worst thing.
That has to be rough. It has to be.
Jerry, I have one more thing to
add.
add.
Sure.
And when I got my test, there weren't signal lights on the car yet. You still had to do it with your hand up and down.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like
Okay.
that. I don't know how it just went anymore, but you had to do it out of the window with your hand.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. Okay, here we go. We have a new gentleman also, and we welcome him, and he'd like to introduce himself and provide some information. Go right ahead, please.
Yes, I'm Ronald E. Dersch, more commonly known as Ron.
Okay.
Originally from this area, born in this area in 1935. In the mid-50s, left for Madison.
Okay.
And reside there yet today.
All right.
My father was the one who taught me how to drive.
Okay.
Obviously, driving the tractor first.
Yes.
Which was a tremendous aid compared to those in town who didn't have that opportunity.
Correct.
We learned in a cow pasture.
Very good.
You couldn't hit too much out there without being in, if you did, you were in real serious trouble. Chevrolet pickup truck.
Okay,
Passed the driver's test in Manitowoc in the first shot, fortunately.
Good for you.
But I frankly don't remember the details of it, except that I did pass.
good enough. Well, thank you for sharing. I appreciate it. And we have another gentleman here.
Hi, I am Fred Jacoby from Manitowoc, and I grew up in Cleveland, or just north of Cleveland on a farm. And I took my driver's test last days of March 1945. I was 14. If you were on a farm, you could get a driver's license when you were 14,
Mm-hmm.
which was supposed to limit you to daytime driving. Well, people didn't worry about those details that much,
Okay.
so we drove all the time. But I'd been driving car already for 4 years by that time.
Oh my gosh.
And I drove the car the first time when I was 9. From driving tractor, see,
Sure. Oh, sure.
same thing.
That all helped.
1935 Ford.
Very good. Thank you very much. And who do you have here, please?
Melvin Yiddish, and I took my driver's test when I was 14 too, and I had the roughest patrol officer in the county at that time, Ludwig,
Ludwig. Oh boy.
and I took the test on a 34 Chevy pickup.
Was it a standard shift also?
Yes,
Okay.
there was no automatics at that time.
Okay. And did you pass your test, sir?
Yes,
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you very much. And who do you have here, please?
My name is Eugene Moiser, and I took my test in Plymouth, and because I was in Sheboygan County, and then we had a 39 Chevy with a shift on the steering column.
Okay. And who taught you how to drive?
My dad, and being on a farm, drove tractors, so
All right. That all helped again.
every bit helps.
Very good. Thank you very much. And who do you have here, please?
Willard Matthias. I started, I got my driver's license at the age of 14, and I drove a 38 Ford pickup.
Okay.
And I had Elmer Bergner giving me my test, and I went around the block, and he said, "That's good enough. You've been driving a long time already." So I passed.
You passed one block.
One block.
And no, did you mention who taught you how to drive?
My dad.
Your dad. Okay, very good. Thank you. And who do you have here, please?
I'm Alice Mathias from from Cleveland. I grew up in Manitowoc,
Okay.
and we never had my family never had a car, except my brother did get one, and that's the car I learned how to drive on. He taught me how, and it was an old big Packard, big four-door type thing.
Okay.
And I had a heck of a time learning how. I was very dumb at driving because I never experienced anything before that. And I took my test in Manitowoc, right by down by the lake there, wherever, Summit Street, wherever they had a regular range there that you would drive.
Okay.
And I remember one time he gave you some kind of signal to hold back or whatever. He had his arm up and you were supposed to take off at a certain, and I took off way before. I figured he was going to put that arm down and you never put it down yet. And
You jumped the gun?
I jumped the gun. But I did pass my test, I think only one time.
Very good. Thank you. And who do you have here, please?
I'm Irene Dine. I was taught by my neighbor man, Mr. Paglo. He took me
Okay.
out a couple times.
Okay.
And then I worked for Thomas Brothers, and they had an old 49 Pontiac, and they let me take that home over weekend, and I drove it around the pasture. And that's where I got my experience. And then when I took my test, Roland Thomas let me use his, I didn't have a car, we didn't have a car at home.
Okay.
So Roland Thomas let me use his car. It was a 51 Chevy.
Okay.
And I took it in Manitowoc, and I made a U-turn backwards. So I slid through too. And after a while, I bought that car.
Oh, you bought the car, yeah? Very good. Thank you. Thank you. And who do you have here, please?
Yeah, Christopher Canal from here in Cleveland, and it definitely brings back a few memories I'd forgotten about. And I grew up in the south side of Milwaukee County, but I spent summers on a farm in Iowa with some relatives there. So I had been driving tractor and a 47 Ford pickup truck for 4 years by the time I went for my driver's license. But I was probably I guess it'd been about a year I'd been in driver ed in high school. It was one of
Okay.
the first few years they offered driver ed. So between my farm driving and the driver ed, I thought it was just superb. And I'm an eldest son, so of course I was the best driver ever created. And the most embarrassing moment of my life, I think, was failing the test. But we have to throw in that it was Milwaukee, and the only family vehicle was a 12-passenger van. So I was driving a 12-passenger van, and I think the only thing I did right was parallel park. I think everything else was a mess. So, but my brother, a couple of years later, took the cake when he took the same 12-passenger van, and as he was coming around the corner, he had one block to get back to the test station yet.
Yes.
As he was coming around the corner, as he describes it, a really old lady with a cane stepped out off the curb and onto the street. And so he just laid on the horn as loud as he could and kept on going, and the guy just waved his head like this. That was the end for him. So he was probably more embarrassed than me.
Thank you. Very good, Chris. Thank you.
No, he failed on that one.
And who do you hear, please?
John Wiegand.
Hi, John.
I started driving tractor
Okay.
down, up and down the lane and in the field.
Very good.
I guess my father and brother got me started on that, a little Ford 8N. It's easy enough to handle. And
Okay.
after that, I went to a car, and most of the time, my mother went along with me, because my father didn't have enough patience for that. Probably for good reason, too. I didn't take a driver's ed course. I should have. Probably would have been better, but I eventually got my license in Kiel.
All right. Very good. Was Pearl or was he out of it already?
I think it was somebody else.
All right. Okay. Very good. Thank you. And who do you have here, please?
Victor Schill from Glenbula, Wisconsin. I got my driver's license in 1953, 1950 Chevy.
Okay.
And I took my driver's license test in Kiel.
Okay.
And I remember it was very snowy. It was middle of December 22nd or 23rd. It was snowing and icy.
Oh, boy.
And I went around the block, and he said, park, do parallel parking by the fire, and I said, it's against the law. He said, you passed.
Good job. Good job. And who do you have here, please?
Walter, Chris.
Yes, Walter.
I never did take a driving test.
You never did.
I drove in Sheboygan when I was 13.
Okay.
I worked in a garage that time. He says, follow me, and I did. In 1937, I went to the bank and paid my quarter and got my license.
No kidding. Just as slick as that, huh?
Yeah.
Holy cow. Thank you.
My dad taught me how to drive.
Your dad did. Okay. Very good. And you, what car was that again, please?
29 Essex.
Oh, my gosh. Very good. And who do you have here, please?
Kathy Wagner from Cleveland here. I didn't get my license until 1953, and my husband was going to teach me how to drive, but after a couple of sessions around town, it was decided that I was going to get my license somewhere else, so I went to LPC in Manitowoc, and I got my license. I mean, I had my classes there, and I got my license the first time around.
Very good.
So I guess I did pretty good. I did so much backing. Bob used to say I could back better than I could drive forward. Because behind some school in Manitowoc, we had to back.
Oh,
you know,
all the way down.
From here all the way down to there.
Very good. Well, that was good training. Good. Thank you. And who do you have here, please?
Well, it's a long story. It'll take me all night to explain it. I really was learning when I was married. And Vernon, he didn't have any patience with it. We had a clutch, you know, or whatever it was. I think we had a shift or something. I don't know what it was. And then he always hollered at me, you're going to burn out that clutch. You're going to burn out that clutch. Wait until we get it automatic, he says. That never happened.
So you really did.
And my two boys learned them all by themselves in our driveway.
Oh, really?
With an old Model A. They went up and down,
up and down.
when they brought home an old Model A. When he first brought it home, then he said to me, when Butch got into the Model A, he says, well, I'd like to see him start that Model A. And nothing got said. And all of a sudden, I says, what did you say? He was driving up and down the driveway. He had figured it out by himself how to start it.
Oh, thank you very much. Good job. And who do you have here?
Marie Pippert.
Yes, Marie.
My dad had the Cleveland garage, so I could pick any car.
Oh, boy.
And I was 16, and Harold Wimler, which is now Tavern, he was a salesman there, and he's the one that taught me to drive. And I remember I picked out one with a rumble seat. I wish I had that car today, but I don't remember the year.
Yes.
But one lesson he gave me, that was it. And we drove, and he put his leg out of on the window on the side. Now drive. Go this way, go that way, turn here, turn there. And it's just the one lesson.
That was it.
Yep.
And you
and
made
I
it.
got my license when I was 16, and it was a quarter you send into Madison. 25 cents.
Good enough.
Couldn't get away with it
Thank you
now.
very much.
Yep.
And who do you have here, please?
Dorothy Anderson, and my uncle had a old Chevrolet, and I was about 14, and then he took me out to learn to drive.
Okay.
And I don't ever remember when I got the license.
Yeah.
It just kept on going.
Kept on going. You had a good time all the while, right?
Right.
Thank you. And who do you have here, please?
Charlie Bauer from Highway C, Newton, and we had an international pickup truck, and basically my two older brothers and my dad, if you could pull up to the combine without hitting the spout and back it up to the elevator, you could drive the truck.
Very good. And you said who taught you then?
It was probably my older brothers.
Okay. All right. Very good, Charlie. And who do you have here, please?
Edith Lutzy. I live in Cleveland. I got my driver's license when I was 30, in 1934. And I was 14 years old too. But we didn't have to take a test at that time. We
Really?
just said we had to drive, had been driving like with my brother or my father.
Mhm.
And we maybe like 200 miles, and then we just sent in and we just got it. We didn't have
Really?
to take a test.
Well, look at that. Well,
I never took the test.
Thank you.
It was a Studebaker touring car. You know what
Oh,
a
really?
touring car was?
No.
It didn't have a solid top. It had canvas top.
okay. So you had style while you took your test, huh? Or you took your driving.
We were driving one
yeah.
night, and there was a storm, and it tore off the top of the car. Yeah. And then we all got soaked.
My gosh.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you very much. Okay, Jerry O'Neill, the videographer. Mine was sort of uneventful compared to everybody here. And again, living on the farm, driving tractors was a big benefit, and I had a 49 Ford, and my dad taught me a little bit how to drive, and around Valders, one route around the block, and I got it, so I was happy too. Okay, I guess we're going on into business of the evening. He's gracious enough to be a guest this evening, and he'll identify himself one more time and tell us a little bit about himself.
Good evening. I'm Al Pape, and I live in Greenbush. And I worked for 15 years with the State Historical Society of Wisconsin. For 12 years, I worked at Old World, Wisconsin, and I had the privilege of researching many different ethnic groups that came to Wisconsin. And we brought in quite a few buildings from around the state. There's over 50 buildings there, authentically restored to different periods. And that was during the period that I met Edith Lutzy and discovered the Lutzy House Barn. I was sent out on assignment by the State Historical Society. The Lutzys had contacted the State Historical Society back in the early 80s, and they said they wanted somebody to examine their structure. And I was under the assumption that it was a log building, and when I drove into the farmstead, I was really shocked to see that there was this enormous German half-timbered building still standing there. Luckily, it had a metal roof on it, or it would have been long ago rotted away. One of the problems with these half-timbered buildings with the clay walls is if they get a leaky roof, the water is held moist in the clay and it rots the wood out. I've restored about a dozen of these buildings over the years, and I have a photograph here of one that I purchased just a few months ago, and in Dodge County, and it looks like that, or it did before we started taking it apart, and then you can see the framework. And this building was built in about 1855. It originally had a thatched roof on it, and it's in a Pomeranian German settlement near Mayville, and it has excellent old world characteristics, especially the way the thatched roof system was held. So you see people, if they're excited enough about this sort of thing, are moved to actually purchase, move, and restore these things for their private use. And that's going in my backyard, and it'll have brick nogging back in the walls, and I won't put a thatched roof on it, but I'll put a modern roof with it looks like a simulated clay tile European look. I learned about these half-timbered buildings while employed at the State Historical Society, and it was a joy to visit the site of these. I plotted about 350 of these sites in Wisconsin, and Wisconsin has more of these than any other state. Manitowoc has just a handful, but Sheboygan has probably 24 still standing near Howard's Grove, and then Dodge County about 100. But they're always amazing to me how the most important architecture ever brought to America by our forefathers, it goes back over 3,000 years to North Africa, excuse me. Originally it was just trees that were put vertically in the ground, and then twigs woven back and forth between the vertical timbers, and then pressed with clay and straw. The Romans, seeing this type of architecture in North Africa, adapted that to their way of building, and they invented the mortise and the tenon joint and the use of bracing, diagonal bracing for strength. So the Romans are really credited for developing this style. And then the Germans made a science out of it. They adopted this concept, and in the 1820s, it became the law in Germany that you had to build this way. You could no longer build with heavy timbers, solid timbers, because there was a series of wars in Germany, and the forests were denuded, and King Frederick Wilhelm III decreed that from now on, everybody that builds a new building has to build this way. And anywhere the Romans went in Europe with their Roman roads, the concept of the half timbering went. France has their own style. Great Britain has their own. There's even some in Ireland that are built that way with the wattle and daub. But it is an incredible idea that, like Chris was saying, is still being made in Germany today. Interestingly, every piece on a German half-timbered building in Wisconsin is marked with a Roman numeral by the original builder. They were really pre-cut structures built out in the framing yard, out in the woods. They were assembled on the ground, flat on the ground, then chiseled with their code system, put on the wagon and brought to the customer's site and put up. So it's a prefab house that was developed hundreds of years ago to be assembled. And it's really awesome to see the joinery as we take these buildings apart. So with that introduction, I just would like to show the slides. Again, starting in Germany.
Okay, if you could hold for just a minute, sir. I'm going to have to lock up the focus that I couldn't get rid of before. Just 1 second.
With a peg. And those little peg holes don't go straight through. They're offset a little bit. And as they push the peg in, or they pound it in there, it brings that tenon, it snugs the timber in close. And actually, when you pull the peg back out, many of them are crooked because they have to wind their way through it to pull that together. Here this nogging, here's the wattle and daub, horizontal twigs wound around vertical staves packed with clay and straw. This one here uses adobe air-dried brick, mud brick. Over here is a fired brick, a low-fired brick. Here's some high-fired brick. This one up here is the wattle and daub. These are repairs have been made over time. The clay, of course, only lasts a certain time because the rain washing the lime or the loamy clay away. And I don't know why this doesn't have any cement over it or lime mortar, but it gives you an idea of adaptability. We've seen here in Wisconsin buildings with the adobe brick. We've seen in Door County, the Pomeranian Germans used cedar blocks, or what we call stovewood infill. We've seen in Freistadt the use of mortar and stones as nogging infill. But the most common is to find the clay and straw. Here we go. Here's a better view of that same building. I don't know why there isn't a mortar over this thing, but perhaps it's being restored. The bottom nogging you can see has been replaced with brick, but look at the way these timbers they're bent and used, but it's a very modulated, well-engineered building. Some ethnic groups use the diagonal that goes this way at the corners. The Hessians go just the opposite. I don't know what would be the difference. But here you have a building that was probably 800 years old. The buildings in Wisconsin date from the 1850s and 60s, around the Civil War. But this form of timber framing was even practiced as late as the 1930s here in Manitowoc County. Some of these old German builders, they say, well, this is the only way to build a building. Grandfather built it this way and father built it this way, and I'm not going to vary much from it. I'm going to build it this way too. So heavy timber building with modifications to this age-old concept are all over the Sheboygan, Manitowoc County still today. This is Melvin's, I think, great-grandfather. His name was Christian Yanig, and he came to Manitowoc County, bought land, and set up his contemporary German farmstead in 1850s Wisconsin.
That, the one that came over was his father, Christian Dudley.
Oh yeah.
And this was the one that was in the Civil War.
Okay, this is the Civil War guy. And here's an air photo of the Yanig farm. Here's the half-timbered house. I'll be talking about central hallways, but anytime you see two chimneys coming out of the roof, you can say, uh-oh, central hallway. And the central hallway in all of these houses was unheated originally. It was a concept that was hundreds and hundreds of years old, based on the fact that you had 2 or 3 families, generations, living in the same building. Grandpa and Grandma Yanig would be on one side of the hallway, and the son and his family would be on the other side, and the hallway between was unheated. And a lot of times they would have hooks on the walls for their clothes or their hand tools for gardening. But the Virklantoff arrangement is a modified. In Germany, these buildings would be touching at the corner, but here in Wisconsin, with all the land that Mr. Yanig was able to acquire, they sort of exploded the arrangement a little bit. And in Germany, the courtyard, the front door would be faced into the courtyard, into the manure pile. But here, in Wisconsin, he faced his house to the south and to the road. That's the front door right there. So they adapted to American ideas. The field location out up here in Germany would have been like spokes on a wheel, long radiating pieces of property going out into the country, very, very narrow, radiating out. But here he could have started with 120 or 160 acres, and he had plenty of room and plenty of fields to create his new world farmstead. Now, one of the neat things that happened on the Yanig farm is, and it's not seen on this photograph, but if you go out the end drive here to the road and down to the corner is where Grandpa Yanig's little piece of paradise was located. And that was an idea that they brought from Europe. This was the home that was set aside for the grandparents. The grandparents would transfer the land to the oldest son with a piece of legal document called a bond of maintenance. It was registered in the county, and for giving the oldest son the farm, the grandpa, and here he is standing there with his horse, gave lifetime tenancy to 1 acre, a miniature version of the farm right at the corner. I think it was 1 acre, maybe it was 2 acres.
A little bit more, not much.
Yeah, and on that, let's say 2 acres, 1 to 2 acres, he had everything he needed. And it was a wonderful social security system. Instead of having your grandparents put into a foreign place, like an assisted living, you kept them in the family, but they had their own living unit. So this house symbolized a very wonderful social security system that originated in Saxony, Germany, and brought to Wisconsin by the Yanigs. So the house is a half timbered, and that's what it looked like in its glory, with a nice painted exterior woodwork and shutters, 1 chimney, and in the back here, this is a barn for 1 cow and his horse, and his cutter was in there, and maybe a buckboard, and the wing next to it was a workshop and a place for chickens and small animals. It had a little central walkway through that went out to the back to the outhouse. And this is what it looked like when I found it. And Robert Yanig owned it, and it was so close to the corner that when they would plow the snow, it would go right up against the barn here. And the county plowing crew or the county highway commissioner or somebody always are discouraging these farms that especially have derelict buildings, to get rid of them so they can plow their snow and it'll fly back from the road. So Robert Yanig finally decided he was going to take these buildings down, and I heard about it, and I said, this is a perfect type of a storyline that we should be preserved, and I tried my best. My wife and I took out a bank loan, bought these buildings, and had professional movers take them down, but we documented everything as if it was going to go to a first-class museum somewhere. Unfortunately, as hard as I tried, I could not find a historical society or a museum to take this set of buildings, but we could have reconstructed this storyline perfectly with the beehives that they had there, which I found one of them in the old house, and the vineyard and the apple orchard and the big gardens. The fencing would have been a perfect old world concept that is still relevant today, and how to treat your older folks. Don't put them away, but keep them active in an environment that they're used to. From the north side, this is the barn. This barn was actually recycled from another site and brought there. And here is the outhouse. And right next to the outhouse is the manure door. So form follows function. The manure door on the side of the barn is right positioned where Mr. Yanig could take a sweep of the shovel from behind the horse and the cow. At waist high, it goes flying through the air right out into a pile next to the outhouse. And there's the door that the Yanigs used for many years to go through the barn and right into the outhouse. And I almost think that you could go from the inside into the outhouse too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hallway went all the way through.
Yeah. This was a passageway all the way through the barn. And there were chickens, I believe, in this back part. But it was a wonderful place for a retired farmer like Christian Yanig, Gottlieb Yanig. They could while away their time. He had a foot-operated lathe in there, and made spinning wheels and the newel posts and balusters for people's houses. But these people were very talented. Close another view of the barn. There's Gene Meyer, historical researcher, and I was showing him the barn. Robert put metal on the corners to keep the raccoons from climbing up the building and breaking through the roof. So it was a slippery thing there. Right here in the gable end, and I'll show a close-up of it in a little while, was an important little window. Here's the front of it. When we were taking the siding off, I wish we would have known right about here underneath the siding, nailed to the main post next to the door post, was a prayer written by Gottlieb Yanig when he built this building, a prayer dedicating this home to God. And it was an old German script folded up and nailed there and then covered over with the siding. And we took the roof off and it rained and the water got behind her, so part of that was, the writing was ruined on it. You couldn't translate it all. But it's a nice little building. The detailing on it, okay, here's the east gable end, and see this little window in here. And both sides had windows like this. The other one was boarded over. But see these little carvings right there? I interpret this that Gottlieb was a Christian, and he built the Christian cross, and these are like little sprigs of corn. I saw this morning the new corn comes up with two little sprigs, and I interpret that as a symbol of new life in Christ. Coupling this with the little prayer that he had on the doorpost, you can see that he was trying to incorporate his Christian faith in an outward design here. Look, viewing into the backyard, here was the doorway going in, as I remember, going into the workshop, unless that was going into the chicken coop. But this was the south-facing window into the workshop. Looking from inside the house, here was the door that went through the barn and gave access to the outhouse, and a big door here where he could bring in his wagons with a little window above it. Looking at some of the details, when he made his windows, he made it different than any other person in Wisconsin made windows. And this is a piece of wood, triangular wood. We call it a window muntin, but it's wood on the inside and the outside. And when he assembles the window, he puts the glass in little grooves there. Now most windows, every other Pioneer window will have the outside has glazing on it, and then they slip the glass in and glaze over it. But he must have learned this in Germany, and the Lutzy house barn, I believe, has the same window detail. Here's the shutter detail, the hardware. Now I still have one of these windows and trim and everything. It's installed in my garage where I park my car. In fact, I took this whole window assembly and reused it at my house. Here you can see the diagonal brace at the corner, and you can actually read these buildings if you have X-ray vision. All you have to do is realize that the nail pattern on the outside obviously is nailing to the timber underneath. So you look at the pattern on the nail on the outside, you can tell that there was a diagonal here. These are little pedimented tops with several pieces of nicely made. All the trim was all hand made by Mr. Yanig, Grandpa Yanig. He had little carpenter planes. Another important thing in the house was the way he made his doors. Of the millions and millions of houses built in America by immigrants, Gottlieb made his doors with a rabbeted edge, like they have back in Germany. Why this rabbeted edge wasn't used on more houses in America, I will not know, because it's such a great idea, because it closes on two surfaces and keeps the cold in or out and the warmth in better. So this is what we're excited about, is these ethnic persistent design elements. And all of these doors are hand planed doors, and all the molding is all done by hand. The raw wood was sawed on a vertical water-powered sawmill a couple of miles away. I forget the name of that little creek that goes down through the Centerville. But then there was 2 layers of flooring and rough sawn on the bottom. These are square nailed, but he put tongue and grooves on these huge pine boards. So we're taking the molding off around the doors, and each piece was marked. We marked it with a metal tag so that it could be reassembled. Only the interior walls had the clay and straw nogging in it. This is the ceiling, but this is a side wall. And the straw was used, they wrapped it around the nogging piece. I call it a stave, this vertical stave. They're hand split, and they fit into little notches that Mr. Yanig made on the underside of each timber. Why he didn't use this on the outside walls is a mystery to me, but he only used it on the interior partition walls. The outside walls were done like the Yankees, just air with lath and plaster. Now this building was probably built around 1865, 10 years after the big house was built.
Our big house was originally a two-story log building.
They lived in a log building?
Yes, that was standing where the big elm tree was.
Okay.
I remember when I was a kid going up and down the steps.
Well, they were great builders and nothing intimidated them. Even timbers like this, which are not going to be exposed, were nicely made, nicely hewn and adzed. He put the timbers, rested them on some big stones, and there was no basement under this structure. And the base timbers were in relatively good condition. Here was a patch that somebody made in the lath, and it was long enough ago, even the patch got the speckling of this blue colored calcimine mixture. There's the clay and straw, nicely plastered with mud, and then covered with calcimine whitewash, and different layers. They generally used a light gray or a light blue calcimine whitewash, and there was maybe 10 layers there. Every 5 years or so, they'd brighten the place up by a new layer of whitewash. Here's a close-up. The mop board at the bottom even had a little bead along the top of it, and very intricate knife work here for the door trim. This happens to be snow that blew in while we were working on it. But there's the clay and straw, and that clay and straw is a concept. Of course, it's thousands of years old, but it's something that the grandparents could do, and the grandchildren could help do. Didn't take a lot of talent. So the carpenter would put a frame in, and they'd put the nogging staves in, and then let the young people and the old people go to it and fill it in. The straw, of course, Germans had to have the rye straw. They loved their rye bread, and they used their straw for bedding. They put it in horse collars. They made beehives out of it. They used it for thatching on the roofs. So the straw was something the Germans were very familiar with. And that was the binder with the clay. Good old Manitowoc County clay loam. Now, I moved that building so many times and finally sold it to a guy in Germantown, Wisconsin, who had an apple orchard, and we had a seminar down there and put the frame up all in one day, and then he went to town and basically ruined the building, adapting it. It's a modern roof on it, not very authentic windows, but there is the frame of what the Yannick house. One funny little diagonal here on the second floor, little brace. Unfortunately, he went bankrupt, and this building was moved again, and I have no idea where it is today. It should have gone to the Smithsonian. It was such a rare building from town of Centerville, but I tried and tried as best I could. I invested thousands of dollars of my own money to try to save these buildings, and it was sort of a lost cause. This is the original half-timbered house, and up here in one of these bedrooms, I found one of this beautiful straw bee skep, and I since learned how to duplicate that technique of making straw beehives. Lilac bushes. And underneath this structure, I think you either went through this opening here, or maybe one over here, went down into this marvelous arched cellar.
No, that's in the middle of the house.
Yeah.
This end was the kitchen, and I was added on afterwards, and we always used this little door.
Somehow I got down in that basement while this building was standing. I don't know, remember exactly how, but this is the winter kitchen on the back here, and then there was a summer kitchen, freestanding, and I have a picture of that. But it's missing its second chimney here. Now the doors, and I don't have a photograph, the doors inside this building were fantastic, or they still are. But I bought all the doors from Robert Yanig before the house was destroyed, and I rehung them in my house. So I get to look at these wonderful Yanig doors. And on the second floor, going to the second floor, was a handmade staircase, and I have that in my house too. I use to go to my third floor in my house. But the details, the Yanigs knew how to make complex miter joints and use the hand planes for making decorative. Now here they're copying the Yankee idea here in America of a Greek Revival house. They adapted to the American way, but here they still use the old timber framing. These are big boards, sub-sheathing, but just the whole detailing, it was a shame that it was torn down. But it should have gone to both houses should have gone to a museum.
This used to be the front door.
Yeah. And look, this is traditional Greek Revival detailing of 1860 Wisconsin. I have the locks that were in that building in my house. They're swirly brown. Now, when the building was taken down, this is the top of the cellar. I've got a wonderful photograph. I couldn't find it of the inside, but it's absolutely amazing how this was made. And I calculate that this basement with the arch ceilings, here's one arch, two arch, three arch, four arch, and then there's a column in the middle, and then over here is another column with four more arches, that this was done after the house was built, because the mortar goes up and over the timbers. You can see where he adapted all of this masonry after the building was standing there. So there was one talented mason working in there with whatever forms he used to hold all that brickwork up and do that mortar work. And the mortar work here is just very crude, just slapped together, squeezed out, but the underside is done very nicely. I think that was one of the grandsons showing me around and some of the cats. But this is the top of the column that holds these barrel vaulting brick ceilings up. Really quite amazing how that was formed. This was the summer kitchen right within 20 feet of the house. Gene Meyer. I don't remember if there was a bake oven in there or not.
No, but there was a smokehouse and a kettle.
A kettle for scalding the pigs, and I don't remember where they got their bread. Going to a different family, the Klessig, Elise Klessig with her children, and a picture of all the Klessig family that came from Germany. And this is a photograph. Probably all of you have seen that already, but I'm most interested in the landscaping. This is the neighbor's fence, the split rail, and then across the street you have the board fencing, and then close to the house is a picket fencing. And this is the cheese factory. We researched cheese factories in Wisconsin, and this is what's called a Type 3 cheese factory. It still is not a long, narrow cheese factory where you had long, narrow vats to cover. These were small, squatty vats, so it was a small, squatty building. And you'll see one similar to this at the Sheboygan County Museum in Sheboygan, an almost identical cheese factory to this style, which came from, they moved that from Howard's Grove. But this is a frame house, a big blocky frame house. But look at all the windows in it, and 2 chimneys coming out, and that was destroyed. Now, another classic, just down the road, farm, and this is the picture. His classic house was just like the other one, except it's made out of brick. The 2 chimneys, 5 windows on the second floor, very symmetrical, very Greek Revival, cornice returns. 2 rooms on each side of a central hallway. Here's the old original log house behind it with the original log barn. And the log barn and this barn were torn down or burned down, replaced by newer ones, which you'll see in a minute. But I always enjoy the fencing. This is on the east side of South Union Road. Then there's the cows in between. That they go up and down the roads, grazing on the free grass of people's right of way, and then the split rail on the west side of South Union, and then closer to the house they put the picket fence in surrounding an apple orchard. And there's Mr. Klessig sitting out there and his tea. That's that Klessig.
That farm burned down now. I couldn't see it last year.
No, too bad. But there's a stone summer kitchen with a bake oven on that farm. I stored the Yanig house and barn right in here for about 5 years, and then moved it to another place and moved it to another place. And if I had to move it one more time, the logs were getting worn out. Here's looking from the west, the granary. The summer kitchen is over here on the left. There's the brick house with a new addition, an older barn, and a newer bank barn. You probably all remember this house. It was on the north side of XX, just west of South Union Road. Again, one of these great big timbered Saxon homes built with a Greek Revival, the American outer skin, but the inside is functioning like the homes built for hundreds of years back home, with an unheated central hallway. It's missing the second chimney. Here they use we call them eyebrow windows of the Greek Revival. This dormer here is a new idea. The west end of this building, I wouldn't be surprised if Grandpa Yanig built this thing, because it has exactly the same detailing on it.
I'm sure he helped build the Lookie house.
Yeah. He was a fantastic builder, carpenter, all around handy guy. Here's the entrance, Greek Revival, but this door design is definitely German. A double door entry. You probably see that back in Saxony. The building here on the LTC grounds, there's the 2 chimneys, 5 windows on top, classic Greek Revival, but a German built what's the name, Schneider on that?
Hetzel.
Hetzel. That should be saved, probably won't be.
No, it's going to be going down.
Yeah, that's a crime. No, this house is still standing on XX, just west of the freeway. This is an unusual one for town of Centerville, and I think it's the last picture I've got here. This is more commonly known as a Pomeranian central hallway farmhouse. And I've never researched the names and so on, but you see this exact same house over in Sheboygan County and Dodge County. I've taken these kind of buildings apart.
You see it was on the south side of XX?
Yeah, just west of the freeway.
That would be a dine farm. Which is originated.
Now it's all remodeled, it's got all kinds of additions on it. But this is when it was still fairly original. But again, two chimneys. When you get grandpa and grandma on this side and the younger family on this side, and the system is hundreds and hundreds of years old, and it works, I mean, it persists. Even though they came to America and they adapted the American Greek Revival design, they still function as a ages-old German farmhouse. And that's what I find quite interesting with the mortar nogging. But this design goes not only back to Germany, back to the Romans, back in time to North Africa 3,000 years ago. It's absolutely awesome. Wisconsin has more of these than any other place in the United States, and we should make every effort we can to save these. So that's my contribution.
You want to get the lights on?
Okay, we had a little controversy on a last photo that was presented, and this gentleman will identify himself and perhaps give us the answer.
John Wiegand, the last picture that was shown there, I'm positive, was where Mrs. Bruno Zill was living. It's not the Schmidt house, it's the one to the west of there.
Okay, and on what road again is this all on? Is there an intersection at all,
Well,
or?
at that time it was 149, but now it's double X.
Okay, and between what roads? Can you give me a little location there?
Well, it would be between South Union Road and, well, now it would be between the interstate, but.
Okay, all right. Just so we got a little idea where it is. And one more time, the owner that you recall was?
Well, the most recent one I recall was Mrs. Bruno Zill was in that house, but
Okay.
that's, 30 plus years ago, but
Okay,
1973, he said.
okay, very good. Well, thank you very much, sir. Okay, we got a gentleman here whose heritage was shown quite vividly this evening, and he'd like to say a few words. Go right ahead, please.
Melvin Yiddish, and this, before Mrs. Brunetzel lived there, Leonard had lived there. Now, I don't remember that his wife was around, unless he was a bachelor, I don't know.
Okay, could you repeat that name one more time?
Leonard,
Leonard.
Andrew.
was it Andrew?
I think so.
Yeah.
Okay, Andrew Leonard? Okay, very good, very good. And any other information you might want to ask this evening?
I'll think of it when I get home.
Okay. Very good, thank you. Okay, we're looking at an old picture, and this gentleman will provide information about that picture. Go right ahead, please.
This is Chris Canal, and this was the mill building that was next to the dam at Hika.
Okay.
And we've got a couple different stories, but one written in 1873 said it was a grist mill with 3 set of stone. I don't know if that applied to this building or not, but I think so.
Okay, all right.
On the left is a fire bell.
Yep, you see the fire bell here.
Okay.
And the little fire building, and there's a little pumper next to it.
Okay, could you tip it a little bit further? Thank you.
But if
Okay.
anybody else could add on to that story, that's about all I know about it. One of the questions that Alan had is why were there so many windows in it?
Okay, good question.
4 stories.
Okay, we've got Kathy here, and she'd like to acknowledge a gentleman that did a fine job this evening.
I would like to thank Alan Pape for the wonderful presentation. It was very
pleasure.
interesting, and I'm so glad you could come and join us.
Yeah, and with my barn project, anybody who wants to come over and help fix the timbers, you're welcome to come over.
Okay.
Now, there's an invitation.
Thank you again.
Sir. Okay, I got a gentleman here who'd like to say a few words.
Alvin Yanish, and this house that Pape took down, he shipped out to New York, and the people refused it. Then it got shipped back to Germantown here, and it was about, I think, a mile south of Dinesville that it was set up,
Okay.
and I didn't know it was
It was part of your
torn down again
heritage.
or
yeah?
whatever.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
And over here.
Oh, yeah. We just got to get back. Okay, here we go. We got a gentleman who worked at this building that we have seen as a picture, and maybe you can give us a little insight as to what they did there. Go right ahead.
Well, this was the old feed mill. They made flour.
Okay.
The west part of this building was the cider mill.
The cider mill,
Cider
okay.
press. It's a Badger Fire Company. The
Okay.
tower. Firehouse is over in here.
Yes, sir.
And this fire equipment is now in Phoenix, Arizona.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
The fire museum.
All
The
right.
Fire Museum. And
Okay. And the rest of the building, what floor did you work on, sir?
over in the feed mill here.
Over in the feed mill there. And the other taller,
1939.
1939.
And the taller building was empty.
Okay.
In the west corner here, they used to make moonshine about 35, 36.
Was it any good?
I don't know, I never tried it.
You never tried it? Okay, well, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it, sir.
We work for $2 a week.
$2 a week. Okay, and your name again, please?
Walter Kress.
Thank you, Walter. Okay, I have a young lady here who attended something special, and she'd like to give her name, please, and give us some information.
I'm Dorothy Anderson from what you call is Hika down in Cleveland. And this is the Red Arrow School.
Okay,
And this must be like about 1900 or something because the kids, they're all wearing the older clothes.
all right.
And I went there for 8 years.
And what years were those, if I may
That
ask?
I went?
Yes,
28 to 32, I guess.
okay.
From first grade to
8th grade?
8th grade.
Okay. And now we have another picture that you might recall some information about. Could you give us that, please?
This is I can read back here.
Good.
Pictured is the second brewery built after the first one was destroyed by fire.
Okay.
This was owned and operated by Gustav Garsky, and that's my grandpa,
Okay,
from 1890 to 1914, at which time it was torn down and the bricks were used to build the Mikado Theater in Manitowoc. The
okay.
brewer was located on the corner of East Washington and Beach Street. Some of the foundation can still be seen. As kids, we used to go across from the school and slide down the hill there.
Okay. Very good, very
And did
good.
you get a picture of Chris with his hat?
No, that was one of my questions, but I didn't want to interrupt and lengthen things out. Okay, a question from the videographer in regard to a special hat that Chris had obtained through a legal means. And how long did a person have to be an apprentice to obtain this, or was this a big ceremony type thing, do you recall?
Well, in Germany, usually they would go to school for 3 years to get their apprenticeship.
Okay.
And then when they would get on the road, is what was called the journeyman.
Yes.
Then, as they were journeying, they would wear this hat along with a black vest and black pants and a white shirt. Actually looked very dressy. I mean, they looked like they were ready for church.
Okay.
That was their work outfit that they would go, and they were required to serve, I believe, 5 years with at least 3 different masters. So they would travel from
Wow.
master to master. But this was the first set of 12 that was ever given to anyone not
Wow.
getting all the way through that training
Okay.
and coming from the U.S. So I was real pleased
Well,
and proud to be able to bring it back, representing that. And I
Yes.
guess it doesn't match the rest
Well,
of the fashion tonight.
It does
but,
go well with color, I'll tell you that. Very good. Well, I thank you very much. Okay, we got a young lady who will give us some information on another meeting coming up.
My name is Kathy Schill, and the next meeting will be June 12, 2006, and Edith Lutzy and Melvin Yanig will be our presenters. It'll be on the Lutzy family and on the Yanig family. So we'll probably have to take parts of tonight and represent them.
Okay, that's
Okay.
fine. Okay. And Kathy, would you just like to thank one more time the people that came this evening?
Yes, I would like to thank Chris for the wonderful presentation. It was outstanding, Chris. That way we can see the old world and the new world like we had on our postcard, right? And the bottom building is a new bed and breakfast that's going up near Bondi's. But I don't know of the couple who owns it. Does anybody? Kessler's.
Okay,
And they live in the old Herman home, correct?
all right.
Located across the road from Bondi's.
Okay.
Okay.
So I guess we'll sign you off this evening.
Okay. Amen.
Amen?
Yeah, and,
Your name, please.
And I want to thank everybody else
Yeah.
for coming too.
Very good. And if I could have your name one more time?
Kathy Schill.
Thank you, Kathy. And we'll go to this gentleman, if your name, please.
Ron Dersch.
Thank you, Ron, for coming. We appreciate it. Come again, please. And who do you have here, please?
Fred Jacoby.
Thank you, Fred. And who do you have here, please?
Melvin Yanig.
Melvin, thank you. And good to see part of your heritage, sir. And who do you have here, please?
Eugene Moiser.
Thank you, Eugene.
Willard Matthias.
Thank you, Willard.
Alice Matthias.
Thank you, Alice.
Irene Dine.
Thank you, Irene. Feeling around here? Okay.
Christopher Canal.
Thank you again, Chris. Good job. And we have another gentleman who's,
John Wiegand.
thank you, John.
Victor Schill.
Thank you, Victor.
Walter Kress.
Thank you, Walter.
Kathy Wagner.
Thank you very much.
Dolores Chris.
Thank you, Dolores.
Marie Pippert,
Thank you, Marie.
Dorothy Anderson,
Thank you, Dorothy.
Charlie Bauer.
Thank you, Charlie.
Edith Lutzy.
Thank you, Edith, for coming. And also farewell from Jerry O'Neill. And I guess our next meeting, one more time, please.
Will be June 12th,
Okay, very good. Thank you.
2006.
Very good. Thank you.